All right, Ed, very insightful comments this morning and discussion about how to put more money into nature and conservation. But let's just start with the basics. What are carbon credits?
Carbon credits is essentially an easy term to describe a verified emission reduction. And by verified emission reduction, we mean 1 ton of CO2, which is either avoided from going into the atmosphere or has been removed from the atmosphere and stored either biologically in trees or soils or wetlands, or geologically in rock formations. And to become a carbon credit, it has to go through an independent certification process, normally done by a large certification body like Verra or Gold Standard or Plan Vivo.
Initially there were carbon credits, now we are talking about nature, biodiversity credits. What's really the difference and the similarities between all these credits?
Essentially all of them are looking to put a value on what we call ecosystem services. So these are the services that nature provides for free, like carbon sequestration or the provision of habitat for biodiversity. So carbon is just the first one of these ecosystem services, like carbon sequestration or habitat protection for biodiversity, which is being standardized and made into a tradable instrument that has a value. Biodiversity as a credit is still really in its infancy. So it's aiming to draw on a lot of the lessons learned from carbon, not make the same mistakes, but it's worth saying that biodiversity is a much more difficult thing to quantify in a single unit or a single credit than carbon. Trying to compare a savanna ecosystem in Zambia is very difficult to compare with a rainforest ecosystem in Brazil. How do you make sure that you're comparing quite literally apples and oranges?
Earlier on you spoke about the integrity of carbon credits, speaking about some that are high quality, others that are low quality. How do you determine this?
I've never met anybody who doesn't think that they have a high quality carbon credit, but there's been a lot of pushback on that, and now we have the analytical framework to try to really get under the skin of what is high quality and what is not. So the way that we at Respira think about that is looking at high integrity from a climate perspective, high integrity from a community perspective, and high integrity from a biodiversity perspective. Now, from a carbon perspective, the key things that we're looking for is, number one, the risk of over-crediting. Do we think that the calculations behind the number of credits generated are sound, and what are they based on? What are the key assumptions there? Number two, it's around permanence. Do we think that these emissions are going to stay out of the atmosphere for a period of time, 30, 40, 50, even 1,000 years? We're looking for number three, additionality. How are we sure that the carbon project wouldn't have happened had it not been for the carbon finance? We only want to make sure that we're having carbon credits that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And number four is around leakage. How do we make sure that we're not just displacing activity from one area to another?
The final question for me, there has been lots of discussion here. How do we bring in communities to this conversation? Because at the end of the day, they are the people who interact first and foremost with the projects. Are we having and bringing communities to the table?
Yeah, I think that quite simply these projects wouldn't exist without the communities. They're the implementers, and they should be the primary beneficiaries as well if the project is designed right. So they have to be core to the whole thing. It's not just a box ticking exercise. If the communities aren't involved with a project, if they're not benefiting from the project, the whole project can come falling down. So they have to be integrated into the project design as key partners to the project.